this aspect of saying work that matters, because that's the main thing that a lot of things I've picked up, but work that matters. And in that case, you really talked about how to enlist the feeling from to where my question now comes in is like, just give us an example. And it ties into this thing you talked about where you did maybe some work in the agency that remained in the agency that really stood out. And the client was like, maybe I can't take a risk, but you knew that this work was going to enlist the feeling. Maybe you can give us an example of the campaign. You don't need to mention the names or anything that you feel, any events in the market that you feel brought out that feeling, so that we can at least have a framework, an idea of how that would be. What is that work that can, enlist those feelings, that kind of emotion? An example of such work would be very welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay. So, Devin, to answer to your question, yes, I might not necessarily say the client and the campaign, but what I can tell you is we had an idea about using albinos. Albinos are not so much in the market, like there are not so many, but whenever you meet one, there is some sort of feeling that you get. It is natural because they are not obvious on when you look at them, how they look, how they behave, and how that, but they intrigue some sort of emotion. And here we have a client who has a problem, and I think it was about a thematic campaign for, you see, their color is interesting because the first thing you see about them is their color. You say, hey, look at their hair color, look at their skin color, look at their eyes color, look at their nails color. Everything about those people is about color. And we wanted to find a way of using, for the very first time, albinos as models on this campaign. What an amazing and remarkable a billboard around town, and it has albinos, and they're talking about color, how they also see color like other people, how they also feel like any other people. So it was an interesting and emotional idea that client feared because of the stigma that the people or the albinos have when they are interacting with other people in the community. But you see, sometimes for you to be effective, you must annoy someone. Because if you're not annoying anybody, then it means you have no attention. Sometimes for you to gain attention, you must deliberately annoy someone. And that for me is work that matters, that most clients wouldn't deliberately say yes about. But if it was for my own, I would say approved. Just run it and we see what happens, because you can manage things like PR, you can manage things like traction and all that kind of stuff. So I still regret the fact that work did not come out. But for me, it's some example of really work that matters, because I'm sure up to now, if that work had been seen, someone would be talking about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis, for that wonderful presentation. I can say for the first time, I'm a very, very good listener, because what you gave was really amazing. And we really
thank you.
I'm the leader for the tech. We have to remove the word management now for the great point, because we hate managers anyway. So for the data and tech department, I want to still believe that for us to be able to execute to our best potential, we still need the track of the data to know how our work is effective in the main market. So I would want to know from you, according to you, what is that good strategy, the data strategy that we can use, and what are the various ways you feel are in order that would incorporate and we have our data well managed, and it is for the benefit of the company and our clients at the same time. What is that strategy you would recommend? What are the do's and don'ts that you would give you? Like you told us how data can be dangerous, we understand that. But now, on the other side, how data is very useful for the company and how can it be effective for the client. I would want to know
so to answer that question about data, I will be clear that I did not necessarily say that data is not a good thing for a business. I only said and emphasized that you need to be very careful with what you use that data for. So yes, always find a way of collecting data, bad or good data. It helps on informing the decisions that you make when you're doing work that matters for these clients. However, the challenge is it always tempts the marketer to think that they can use this data to spam people. And that's where things go wrong. So the data that you should always collect should always be things like consumer behaviors and interaction with the product, not how many times they are online, not how many women are following versus men who are following, because that data misleads. The most important data would be how do customers feel when product X from client shows up in front of them, so that the next time you're communicating or pushing a message about that product, you know about their feeling, not about their sex and what time they are online and about, because for me, the data that is important is the customer behavior with the product, not social media behavior, because that's what most marketers look for. How many women are following you? What time are they online? What is their busiest hours? Like between 3 and 5, they are so busy. So that you can use that information to throw all sorts of things in front of them by boosting and doing all this kind of stuff, forcing them. So for me, it would be going deep down to product, and you get the understanding of client X versus product Y. Like, you guys have seen this Movit hair shampoo. What do you feel about it? Do you think it's good? Sometimes you can even compare it to competition. Like, do you think it's like the Radiant shampoo? Then from there, you'll get for me what I call relevant data. Not algorithms from Facebook telling you how this brand is busy at 2 and 3, and then you use that information to spam. So for me, the data is about the product, how people feel, not what they see. How do they feel? Because once you understand how people feel, I'll give you an example. When you're in a bar or in a restaurant and they give, you ask for water, they give you some, I don't want to mention brands here just for the sake, but I'll give you an example. When someone brings, let's say, Hema water, how do you feel? I've seen people who say, I want Renzori. What's the thing? If the thing at that point was thirst, then they would just drink the water. But it's beyond thirst. And once you understand that feeling, that it is beyond thirst, it's about how they look in front of others with this product, then you know that you need to also emphasize on things like brand appeal, things like top of mind awareness, things like how the product looks. Because at that point, by the time someone rejects the other water for this water, it's not necessarily about water anymore. It's about how they feel when they hold water X versus water B. That is the data you need. You need to know, why do people chase away our water when they are in public? Why do people like holding our water when they are in public? What is that information? That information, Facebook will never give it to you. You can only get that information if you talk to the real people. And talking to real people, you have to show up in a way that they expect as an agency. And that's why there is research, not data collection from algorithms that have been put in place by these social media companies and Google and YouTube to make us annoyed and, wanting to see who followed you. What did they say about you when you're not around? So that all information, I don't think, for me, is the kind of data that I would encourage you guys to look for. Look for the reason. Why do people like Renzori? Why do guys like MTN? What is that thing that these guys do that the other person has failed to do? Why do guys like Cafe Java's paper bags? What is that? What is in that paper bag? Because probably they might not have the best food or even the best chicken around. But why do people like that paper bag? You find someone in the market and they have the Cafe Java's paper bag, they are buying onions. What are they trying to show? How do they feel when they are carrying that paper bag? And that feeling for me is the most important data you guys should be collecting than knowing what time these guys eat, knowing what time these guys go to town, knowing what time these guys sleep, because that data leads into spamming because it's tempting.
My question would be on how do you filter and apply certain knowledge to certain teams? There'll be certain times that you're working with the team, and then there are certain times that you're working for a team. When you're working with the team, mostly the goals are aligned. You people have one goal and one mind. But when you're working for a team, what I've gotten to experience is people have different ideas, but they are going to the same goal. They're working towards achieving that goal. So during that time, how do you differentiate being a leader and being a manager? Because I think it conflicts at a certain point. Yes, you do hate managers, but we've gotten that. But I think there's a certain conflict that comes in if you're being a leader to a certain team that doesn't accept leadership, but need management. So I wanted to hear your opinion on what type of knowledge you can apply to a certain group or a certain type of team. Thank you.
Okay, so I like that question of sometimes you fear to behave like a leader or a manager or something because you have to behave a certain way. So so one thing, it's not about just hating for the sake. It's when you're a manager, you tend to create to-do list and then you find yourself racing to the bottom. What I mean by racing to the bottom is you put your team in a situation where they have to do stuff that pleases you, not necessarily that matters. Because, for example, if I know that my manager likes talking, I will always be in the meeting and I will keep quiet because that makes him happy. That keeps me my job. I hope I'm making myself clear because I know if I talk back to this person, he gets angry and he might fire me. So because I want to keep my job, I always keep quiet because I know he is a manager. He wants to dominate. He wants to create the to-do list. He wants us to listen. But that puts the agency, which is a big idea here, Grey Point Media, at risk of racing to the bottom. By racing to the bottom, I mean, you find yourselves executing only the ideas of the manager. And it's not a one-man's show, unfortunately. It's not a one-man's show. So if you put yourself in a situation where if manager X doesn't like, then we are doomed. That business won't last for long because if it was about him, he wouldn't have employed you. The reason why you're there is you have to also put their ideas. If it means conflict, I would rather be fired for expressing myself in the right way than fired for not showing up, fired for not sharing my ideas. Let people say that guy was fired because he used to express himself. He used to bring ideas on the table that the manager didn't like. Not the client, the manager did not like his idea. What a story. Because everyone is looking for that person. Who is this person that has the balls to disagree with the manager? Because we've been put in a situation where you want to keep your job and then you have to agree with your manager all the time. And that puts the business at risk because you can't keep on executing the manager's ideas. We need leaders. And it's not a talent to be a leader. It's a skill. You can learn to lead people. Don't say, for me, I'm not talented to be a leader. Me, I can be a manager. No. You can learn to lead people by giving them the opportunity to express themselves. Sometimes they are wrong. Sometimes they are right. And that's what good leaders do. They don't know where they are going, but they give the person the opportunity to try. If you reach there successfully, well and good. If you don't, you have to be glad that you learned something that didn't work. Let me give you an example. So Bobi Wine shows up and starts a political party. In less than 6 months, it becomes an issue. What do you call that person in your own understanding? Is that person a manager? Did he pay anyone? Did he create a to-do list for people to follow? What did he do that made people start following him, listening to him, paying attention, and all that kind of stuff? He came up with a promise, not a to-do list. He came up with promises and ideas that people were not so sure whether they will work or not, but they wanted to give it a try. And that's what great leaders do. Great leaders give people opportunities to express themselves, not create to-do lists. And you as an employee, you must understand that if you keep on doing the manager's work, soon or later you will be replaced because there is someone out there who wants to do your work cheaper.
Apparently, I don't have any question. But then I'll just thank Mr. Francis for this wonderful message to us. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yes, hello. And I want to again start by first thanking you, Francis, for taking the time. It has really been a wonderful experience. I've always been a big fan of TBWA work, and finding that you've actually been with the team for this long is actually impressive, because that shows that the work that has been coming out has been having a certain level of consistency with the team of production. So my question is about your process of creation. I like the example you gave earlier about this campaign you had to work on, and you had to go to the bar to just sit down and take the time to observe and see what the actual people you're trying to address act like, to be able to understand how they make the certain decisions they make. And my question would be, how do you usually go about your process when you're making these campaigns, or be it designs? How do you engage your team? How do you come up with the ideas from the time you're concepting them to actually giving them out as finished work? Do you usually have a sort of guideline you follow, or it's usually dependent on the type of client you get and the experimentation you wish to do with that level of client?
Okay, that's a great question. That's a great question, because many people want to understand how does work come from the agency? What's the process? So straight into the process. The work you see out in the market, yes, will look fresh, but this work takes time. Some campaigns take a year. Some campaigns take 2 years. Some campaigns take 3 weeks. Some campaigns take 2 months. So the agency is not a garbage in, garbage out sort of environment. And that's why the work that you see in the market, you can easily tell that it's coming from an agency because of the thought and the time that is dedicated behind it. I'm not saying we don't have pressure work where they need it like yesterday, but the beauty with the agency is you can see a campaign, let's say Bosco for MTN on the billboard and TV and everywhere. And this campaign has been in the agency for about 8 months of working and trying and doing tests on sample groups to see the reaction, to see how people welcome it, will people understand it? Because you have to go to market and understand that this idea might work by doing a sample with a small group of people, and they see they're like, they don't like the name, the thing is complicated, you go back to the drawing board. And what agencies do is they work as teams. You can get a brilliant idea from a receptionist. You can get the best idea from an askari. So when we have these meetings about a campaign, you invite everybody. Like, hey, askari, come. Hey, person who dispatches these things to client, come. We have a meeting about maybe this idea. Let's hear your opinion. And everyone airs out their feeling and sentiment and observation and how they think this should come out. And it's from that us creatives and the strategy people pick some insights, and you're like, I like the askari's point of view. You will be surprised that all these ideas you see out there, it's sparked by the askari's insight, or a lady at the reception, or someone from finance. So creatives, you don't have like authority over everything you guys see. My duty is to make this thing look visually appealing and pretty, but you might find that the idea originated from someone who cleans, a cleaner. So we get a brief from client, and then we have to involve everyone, get their ideas, do some testing in the market and see if they understand before we expose it to the large audience. Because by the time we put up something, it means we have done some research and we are almost sure it will be understood. That's why agency work tends to look effective and stands out in the market. And you can easily tell that this work is from the agency, this is not.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Francis, for that wonderful speech. My question is about how do we handle prospects that want, especially the socials, likes, followings, and retreats, for to best on to work with you?
How do you deal with a prospect who wants to base on your socials numbers on social, and the numbers on your social media to work with you? How would you be able to deal with such a prospect if you're a young company who doesn't have that kind of reach yet?
Okay, so to take me back to what I said earlier, because you are a young company, you should not be measured by numbers, because what numbers do is they put someone on the edges, and it's a form of hiding. It's not necessarily the person with the biggest following that has good work, because we've been in a situation where numbers are manipulated. Numbers, for me, I'm not a person of numbers. I'm a person of work that matters. You don't have to chase that person. It means that person is not for you. You don't have to chase. I know there is survive where you want the business to survive and all that kind of stuff. But if you showed up with good work and someone's like, I don't like it, it simply means that that work is not for that person. You have to accept that you can't do stuff that pleases everyone. That life is gone. It is you to focus on the results, like I said. Keep doing work that matters for the already existing clients. Later on, the people who used to gauge you by numbers will now start gauging you by result. That's why you don't have to worry about the following, social media, numbers and shit, to make sure you matter. Because you will find yourself always trying to get followers, and followers are not necessarily clients. Followers are not friends. Followers is just an idea from these social media companies that they have created, that you think when you have the biggest number of followers, you matter. I want to tell you not. It is about work. You do good work and it will bring in client one. Client one will tell client B. Client B will bring in client C. And eventually Great Point Media will grow, not by numbers, but by the value that client X recommends client Y to work with you. So if your focus is on numbers and making sure you impress us by numbers and followers, I think you're gone. Now you're in a trap which has been built by these social media companies, but that everyone is chasing to get numbers. The best option and advice I can give you is to ignore the noise that is created by numbers and focus on doing work that matters. Work that matters leads into talkability, leads into client trying you out, leads into results. That's the thing. Don't focus on numbers. You will be in a dangerous space as a young business.
So my first question is, do you take the channels of distribution in consideration? And by that, I just mean media in general, whether it is television or online, because all of these are meant to drive to a particular sense, to different senses in human beings. And thank you so much again, because I have learned a lot to think about and a lot to apply as well. Going back to my questions again, because something I see is, when you go online and you're doing a lot of research, you'll see that, okay, the online part has taken over, but which is also partially true and untrue at the same time. But anyway, it depends on the message that someone wants to relay. But my first question was, do you take the channels in consideration? And if yes, what words of wisdom would you give for every particular channel? Any rules that should be taken into consideration? Anything that should be put in mind when developing or creating content for particular channels?
Okay, yes, to answer to your question, like I said in my initial presentation, unlike before where advertising was the thing, you would just get a mega microphone and make noise to whoever you think can hear you, and then you assume that at the end of the day when they buy, you make a profit and make noise to them again. It has changed. And while it has changed, you still have to hold a megaphone, but in a very smarter and interesting way, which for you, you're calling a decision to choose which media platform to put what. Yes, while you're allocating these messages, you need to be deliberate about what you say, how and where. So when we come up with these campaigns, what happens is you need to study the behavior of people and you understand which kind of person am I talking to? What do they like? How does this person want to be talked to? Because I can give you an example. I know you're a lady and probably you might not have heard about maybe Tinder or something. So Tinder is a social network, is a social date, is a dating, whatever, some sort of app. And it has all these kind of people. And then we also have Facebook. It has almost the same kind of people. But what makes Tinder different from Facebook? Where is the value? Because the value of Facebook is not the same value of Tinder, but they all have the same person. The person who is logged on to Facebook is the same person who is logged on to Tinder, but the objective of these platforms are different. That's why you will not find a serious company advertising on Tinder, but you will find a serious company advertising on Facebook because the objectives of these companies are different. And that also informs you as a media buyer to have different objectives for different media channels for different people. Like never before these days, brands have to treat customers differently. Different customers, different messaging. If you're talking to a golfer, have to talk to them differently. If you're talking to a border guy, you have to talk to them differently. If you're talking to a slave queen on Instagram, you have to talk to them differently. But remember, you're selling the same product. How you package data bundles for a border guy might necessarily be different from how you package the same data bundle to a slave queen on Instagram. And you have to also consider the golfer, because the way he buys and digests information is not the same as a border guy. The border guy is not like a slave queen. So yes, while choosing media platforms, you have to be deliberate on who you're talking to and how this person wants to be talked to. So yes, we consider a lot of things. That's why some ads, you won't find them in newspapers. That's why some events, you won't find them on billboards. That's why certain things don't show up in spaces that you're familiar with. Some things come as messages on your phone and they never do any campaign about them. So yes, you have to be deliberate on media and how you're approaching it. Treat different customers differently.